Good morning, students. Welcome back. So today we'll start with a new chapter, and I would say the basic requirements of audit is actually what we are going to cover. And in relation to the audit, we can say this is the most important part. Okay, so we are talking about audit planning, okay, and of course the audit strategy that we'll have, audit execution, which will also be involved, right? So this is chapter 3. Now, why do we say it's the most important part? Because audit planning is the key in respect of any audit. And till the time we do not have the audit planning in place, so we'll not be able to execute the work in an effective manner. Yeah, so that's why you can say that this audit planning is the key area in relation to audit of the financial statements. Now, what do you mean by planning? See, actually, if we talk about planning, and it's not something which is limited to only audit, it's something which will apply to any type of engagement or any type of project that you'll have. Yes or no? See, whenever we have to, say, for example, get onto a project, so what will you do? First of all, you will do some basic working on that. Basic working means you will plan out around the timelines in which you will want to complete the work. That's one. You will look at the resources who will be required in relation to that project. In terms of resources, you will think about everything. So whether it's about the people, any sort of external support, everything. Yes or no? And then you'll also work on a strategy, or you can say you'll work out or work out a plan in a manner that maybe every day or maybe on a regular basis, what are the things you will be doing? Yes or no? So that's how you will plan that project. If let's suppose that is not done, so will you not be able to complete the work? Answer is yes, you will be able to complete the work. But in most of the cases, the work you do may not be as effective, may not be in line with what you wanted to do. Yes or no? Yeah. Now, if you look at a very simple example, say you have to plan a trip. So there are two ways to look at it. Either you plan it properly. If you plan it properly, then of course, you'll know everything as to what is required to be done, when is that required to be done. You'll have all of the things in place. Okay. So your trip becomes more enjoyable, or you'll be getting onto the trip the way you want. Other thing is that let's suppose all of a sudden you get up and you just move out. Okay. So therein you'll not know as to what is required to be done. Yes or no? And given the timelines that you will have, or maybe if you have some time frame within which you are planning to say come back, so you'll not enjoy that much, right? So that's why we can say in relation to any activity, any project, what do we need? A very simple aspect is about the planning. Yes or no? So the same thing will apply to audit as well. Now, what is audit? Audit is also a project, or you can say here again, when we talk about audit, basically we are talking about a set of activities which we plan to complete over a period of time, wherein we understand some of the resources will be required. And for doing that activity or the project in an effective manner, so in a similar manner, what do you need? You will need the same thing. That is a plan, and which is what you call as audit plan. Correct? Right? So now we'll talk about audit planning. So as we discussed, where do you need it? Now, in relation to audit, all the audit procedures which the auditor will have to, say for example, work on. So what will he need? He'll need an audit plan. By doing this, what will happen? He will be able to think through the audit procedures, align those audit procedures as per the timelines of the client. And if let's suppose he's focusing on the important areas which he has planned, which he has thought through, that is what will make his audit an effective audit, right? So therefore, we can say that in a way, what is he going to achieve? He will be able to give suitable attention to important or high risk areas of audit. Correct. See, every project today is time bound. Yes or no? So every time you have a project which is time bound. So that's why for you to get onto a project, what do you need? You need to chalk out a proper plan on the basis of those timelines. Because if let's suppose you are able to complete the work, but you are not able to complete the work within the timeline, so will that be considered to be an effective one? Answer is no. That may not be helpful. Why? Because if let's suppose the timelines are not met, or there is let's suppose non-compliance due to the timeline which is not met, then there again, even though you are doing the good work, that may not be of much use or that may not be appreciated. So that's why another important aspect is about looking at the timelines. Okay. The next important part is that when you plan, only then you will get to know what all resources will be required. Yeah. So if you need any external support in terms of an expert, say an expert is required in relation to a particular industry, in relation to a particular matter, in relation to let's suppose the IT systems that the client is having, or in relation to let's suppose any of the taxation matters, you need the involvement of say indirect tax expert. So all of these things, how will you get to know? Through planning. And even if you look at the team, so will not be able to work out a proper strategy if the team is not proper. Yeah. So you need to have a good team in place. So you'll have to think through as to which all people can be devoted on the project. Now, how will you do this? You'll look at the relevant experience in that particular industry, or maybe for that particular client, if that happens to be a continuing client. You'll also look at the skill set. For example, some of the people may be knowing how to audit PPE, how to audit revenue. Some of the people could be very new to the organization who do not know anything in terms of the audit because practically they have not done that. Yeah, so there has to be a good blend of such persons because you want to train them and you also want to complete the work. Correct? So, how do you achieve that? That is again something which will form part of your planning to begin with. each and every team member which is planned should also be knowing as to what is required to be done. Because if, let's suppose, you have a team of 5 persons, you put them on a job, okay, and you ask them that you can just complete the audit. So nobody knows as to what is required to be done, or nobody knows as to what the other person is doing. So there could be an overlap. Yeah, you do not want to be in a situation wherein there is an overlap. Number one, to begin with. That is a very important aspect. Yes or no? Yeah. So this overlap is something you will not like to be in a situation. Number one. Number two, when there is a clarity, so there will be a good coordination. And that can only be achieved once you assign the roles and responsibilities, or you can say the jobs, to the respective team members. And where do you do that? While planning the audit. Further, when it comes to the team, so it's not only about people who will be involved in terms of execution. There has to be a mix of people, because some of the experienced personals will also be involved. Senior team members will be there who will be looking at the work of the engagement team members and suggesting them for improvements wherever required, for gaps if there are any that need to be filled. Okay, so you can say it's all about review of the work of engagement team members. Correct. So that's why somebody has to be there who can guide them, who can direct them, and who can also supervise them in terms of the work. Yes or no? And that's how any audit project will be going on. Correct. Yeah. So very good. I can see some sort of inputs from Swaminathan also. So he suggested that expert may be required. Yes, of course, on the complex matters. Then the next point is allocation, review, and supervise. Yes, of course, this is an important part of the audit planning in terms of the resources that the project will require. And for that, competence and capabilities will have to be assessed. Yes, of course, very good. Yeah. Now, all of these things will help the auditor in achieving what? In ensuring that the audit is executed in an effective and efficient manner. Yes or no? Because that's the endeavor. That is what you want to achieve. And that is only possible when you plan the audit. Correct? Now, what are the factors when it comes to the planning which need to be considered? See, there are a lot of factors which will have an impact on the audit planning. If you look at it from the perspective of the organization, means the client or the company which is getting audited, or which is going to be audited. So what is the first thing you will begin with? The first thing that you will begin with happens to be the industry. Okay, the industry in which the client operates, whether it is telecom, whether it is, let's say, for example, consumer durables, whether it is, let's say, for example, real estate. Okay, now depending on the industry, what will you do? You'll have to think about the challenges which may be involved. Okay, so you can say first step for the auditor look at is going to be what? understanding of the client. Okay. So broadly, we can say an understanding of the client will be required. Now, what do you mean by understanding of the client? Let's try to understand. Now, when it comes to the understanding of the client, okay, so we are not talking about, say, for example, getting familiar with the people who may be there at the client place. Okay, so idea is not that the audit team members should be introduced to the concerned team members. No, that is not the understanding. By the understanding, we mean to say a complete and thorough understanding of the entity which is going to be audited. Now, how do you do this and why is that important? Let's try to think about it. Okay. Now, say there is a company for which payroll will have to be audited. Okay. So now what do you want to audit? Employee cost. So that means payroll is something you plan to audit. Now, in relation to payroll, let's suppose majority of the employees that the client is having are contractual. Okay. So the terms of the contract become important for the auditor to understand, because that is what is going to be contributing to this cost. How many number of employees are working, and how are those spread out? If let's suppose the company has got few plants, they have a corporate office. Okay, so over there, how are they spread out is again required to be looked at. Now that is very, very important. Yes or no? That is important. Only then, only when you understand these points about the payroll, only then you will be able to think through the audit procedures. Yes or no? Because otherwise, will you not be able to audit the payroll? Yes, of course, you can audit the payroll. But while auditing the payroll, if you do not obtain this understanding, what will you do? You will apply the generalized audit procedures, which are common for any entity. Yes or no? So you will just simply generalize them. You will apply it by considering as if it's there in any entity. Yes or no? Correct. Now, in this case, what do you need? In this case, you need an understanding. Now, the same goes for the client, same goes for the company. See, the company is going to be audited because its financial statements are effectively a reflection of its business performance. Okay, as to where the assets and liabilities are as on a particular date, what those assets and liabilities are as on a particular date, and of course, various aspects related to the business are getting reflected in the financial statements. So for an auditor, it becomes important to have a clarity around each and every aspect of the business. If that clarity is not there, what do you achieve? You don't achieve anything out of this. Yes or no? Yeah, so you don't achieve anything out of this. So that's why what is going to be the first step when it comes to the understanding? We need to have a clarity of the industry. We need to have a clarity as around the size of the organization. We need to understand about the processes in terms of the complexity, if there is any. Sometimes it could be a continuing client, which can be a good thing. Why? Because then the auditor will have some understanding. Why? Because the auditor is auditing this entity year on year, or maybe in the last year. So auditor will have clarity of how this entire process runs. There might be some, but a lot of things will generally be similar. There may also be some past experiences in relation to some of the observations, some of the issues which the auditor may have faced. So the auditor will also have a clarity around that. Yes or no? Now, if the auditor will have a clarity, so what can he do? He can plan his audit procedures. Okay. Why? Because he would have to ensure that some of those challenges which were there, some of the risks which were there in the previous years are now getting taken care of. So that is what the auditor will always want to achieve, right? Now, we can say that when it comes to the audit, what is the first step? Always, it's the planning. Right? Now, when do you plan? Of course, before you begin the audit, before you go to the client place, or you can say before actually getting on to the substantive testing, before applying the substantive audit procedures, what do? You will plan. Yes or no? You'll plan. But a question arises that let's suppose you have planned, you have chalked out a strategy, everything you have done as around the planning. There are a lot of things we have talked about. Let's suppose everything has been done as around the plan. Okay. And then what do? Then you move on to the next stage, which is called as execution. Okay. Once the field work is completed, what will you do? You will get on to the conclusion and reporting. Okay. Now, let's suppose when you are involved in the field work, what is field work? When you are executing the audit procedures, when you are there on the field, means at the client place. That's what you call as field work, right? Now, let's suppose during the course of this field work, there were certain areas that you have planned. And when you applied the audit procedures, or when you obtained a further understanding, okay, which is generally enhanced during the course of audit, because you get to see documents, you get to see some of the details. So your understanding improves. Okay. Irrespective of whether it's a continuing or a new audit engagement in both the cases. Now let's suppose during this stage, some of the new things have come up. Maybe the types of contracts of revenue are new. Maybe the procurement process has got changed slightly. And that's why you have a new set of vendors coming up, which are contributing, you can say, a major chunk. Okay. Now, in such a scenario, a question arises that how do you deal with this? Why? Because when it comes to the execution, what will you do? You will be applying the audit procedures that you have planned. Correct. Now, something that you have not planned, which is not new to you, now how do you deal with that? Does it mean that the way we have planned, we need to go about it? Okay. Means, is there any sort of rigidity in terms of following a particular plan? So should we say it is something which we have done for the year and that's why we'll just apply that? Answer is no. See, the plan has to be flexible. It cannot be a rigid plan. So if let's suppose any changes are required in the plan during the course of audit, means till the time audit is not completed, a report is not signed off. If any change is required, if any improvement is required, what should the auditor do? Auditor should make sure that such a change improvement is done. Correct. Now, how will the auditor achieve it? Auditor will have to achieve this by, you can say, reassessing the plan. Okay, at every stage of audit. So that's why we can say that planning is actually a continuous process. So it's a continuous process. Right? Now, again, very important part. See, if the planning is kept continuous, or you can say it is done in a continuous manner, means you keep it flexible. That doesn't mean that you will have to just keep changing your plan every now and then. It's just that whenever any change is required, you are accommodative. Okay? So that's the thought process that we have. Okay. Similarly, if let's suppose you look at the size of the entity, so what will you do? Depending on the size, depending on the complexity of the entity, you look at some of the areas as significant. Means that will also become your basis of calling some of the areas as significant. Or the ones which have got significant risk attached to them. So there again, what will happen? Audit procedures will be drafted accordingly. Yes or no? Yeah? No. What are the steps you will see which are involved in audit planning? See, there are a lot of steps which are involved in the audit planning. What is the first thing? See, actually, before the audit planning, also, you will have some engagement formalities. So, I'm just assuming that all of those engagement formalities have been completed. And it's a good to go situation for the audit team. Now, as we use this word audit team, what do we need? We need a team which will implement the work. Correct. The team who will be there will be performing the audit. And that's where your first step sort of arises. What do you need? You need to identify the engagement team. Yes or no? Now, while identifying the engagement team, I think we have already talked about it. Some of the considerations that you will have. Yeah. Any thoughts that you'd like to share? Anyone? Manish, Saminathan, any thoughts you like to share as around the engagement team members, the considerations that you'll have? Yes, Saminathan.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good
During
morning.
the engagement team involvement, see,
Yes.
during the planning stage on the discussion, we need to involve the EQCR as well.
Okay.
And also, if you are using that any external expert or joint auditors,
Right.
that person also need to be included in the part of the discussion.
Right. What else?
Yeah, see, overall that the involvement of engagement and team member all should be there in the meeting, so that the entire point will be discussed and can be identified the overall audit strategy and the planning.
Okay.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
Okay. Now, as regards the engagement team member, I think we have already talked about some of the considerations. The skill set, the relevant experience, okay, of the industry, of the client, of the areas which are going to be audited. So these are some of the factors which will be considered for selecting the team members for the audit engagement. Now, over here, the question arises, who are considered as the engagement team members? So you can say anybody who is involved from the audit side. Okay, so there are two sites we can look at. So one is the management or the entity, second is the auditor. So that's why if you talk about EQCR, see the EQCR is not involved in day-to-day activities related to audit. Yes or no? And sometimes the auditor may want to engage some experts, may have some limited role to play. But anybody who is working on behalf of the auditor, that's what you call as the audit team members. Okay. So this confusion should not be there. Then, of course, what is going to be the next step? A lot of activities will have to be thought through. And on the basis of those activities, those understanding, those past issues, what do you come up with? An overall audit plan. Okay. The strategy which the audit team will be thinking of. Now, when it comes to the audit, see, generally, when you plan that, so what will you do? There will be a planning meeting. Now, this planning meeting is something which is very important. See, there will be some pre work and post work in relation to this planning meeting, no doubt. Okay. Some pre work will be there. Now, what can be the pre work? Pre work could be the agenda, okay, on which the audit team members will be working on. In fact, the points over which a discussion will be required in the planning meeting. Now, this planning meeting will take place in two stages. So, one is wherein the audit team members will plan the work, the audit procedures, the areas, anything around the audit, which is going to be an internal meeting. And then, of course, there will also be a planning meeting with the client, because the audit team is going to engage with the client in terms of performing the audit procedure. So that's why they also need to have this discussion with the client. Correct. Now, what are the agenda items you will have over there? Now, what are those considerations you will generally have when it comes to the planning? So we can say, first of all, it's about the understanding or the update of the understanding of the client, its business, its processes, which will have to be discussed. Because in this meeting, it will be a discussion around what is required to be done. Okay, so we are not saying an agenda has been finalized. What is the purpose of this meeting? To, of course, work around the audit procedures, to have a discussion around the significant risk, to have a discussion around what is required to be done, and of course, within the timelines. Okay. In this case, each and every aspect in relation to the audit planning will have to be discussed. And some of the important areas when it comes to the planning meeting happen to be the risk assessment and the responses of the auditor in relation to all of those risks. Responses means you can say the audit procedures, which the auditor will plan to perform. Okay, now again, as we discussed, this risk assessment is very important, which the auditor would have done on the basis of the discussions with the management or on the basis of the past experiences. Okay, because in this risk assessment, auditor will have a clarity as to what is a significant risk area and what is not. Right? Next, materiality. A very important area as far as planning is concerned. Can you throw some light on materiality? What materiality is? Manish, Saminathan. I want a detailed understanding as around this materiality and the relevance of this materiality in the planning meeting. Yes, over to you. Any thoughts? What is the role of materiality? How is it relevant in terms of planning? Yes,
Yes, sir. The materiality and the planning stage to determine the nature and the timing and
yes,
the extent of the further audit procedure.
right.
That is the reason the materiality is needed on this planning stage.
Okay. But the question is not about whether it is needed or needed. I have a couple of questions. One is, what is this materiality? And why is this needed? What is the relevance of this?
So materiality to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement
Okay,
and the evaluate the effect of uncorrected misstatement, if
okay,
any,
okay,
during the course of audit.
okay.
This is a need for it.
But how do you achieve that? If you can give me an example, how will you
Yeah,
achieve it?
yeah, we can fix that the materiality level.
Okay,
Materiality that we can, based on the benchmarking, we can fix it. The element of the financial statement like asset, liability, equity, expenses and income, based on some percentage we can fix it. Or like that what is the owner's fund capital, the structure, and the relate volatility of the business.
mm,
So based on the benchmarking, that we can fix that materiality. And in the materiality, say example, the company turnover is 100 crore based
right.
on the turnover. Then if you put 10 percentage,
Okay,
which means 1 crore, the materiality. That is the
right.
overall materiality. In that, the auditor will also fix the performance materiality, which is
Okay,
lesser than 1 crore.
right,
So that he will take it as a materiality. Based on that, he will identify and assess the risk of material misstatement, if any,
right.
during the audit.
Okay. Now, in this case, as we understand what is materiality, it's actually a threshold. Yes or no? Or as around this threshold, we can say that it's generally based on some quantitative factors. But over here, you will not be ignoring the qualitative factors as well. Okay. Now, how does it help? It helps quite significantly. Why? Because one, you need to have a clarity as to what is significant and what is not so significant. So, how will you get to know about it? Materiality will give you this answer. Yes or no? Because something which is below that threshold is not an important area, or even if there is any error, misstatement in respect of that area, there's not going to be any material misstatement. Yeah. So, why do we need to focus on that area? No, we don't need to. Correct. So this materiality plays a very important role. Again, for materiality, we can have a separate detailed discussion. And as regards this materiality, it gives a lot of answers in terms of the audit procedures as well, in terms of the samples to be selected, in terms of the population to be looked at. Yeah. So that's why another very important area when it comes to the planning happens to be what? Materiality. Okay. Now, all of these discussions will be taking place. So you can say this is some of the agenda items, not all, some of the agenda items for the planning meeting. Okay. Now, as we discussed that this planning meeting has to be an internal to begin with. And in this planning meeting, generally there's a thought that only the senior team members should be there, or maybe the partner or the senior team members will have a discussion. See, if you do that, that will be inappropriate. So if you look at the audit work, majority of the groundwork, you can say effectively 70 to 80% of the field work is performed by whom? Junior team members. In most of the cases. Yes or no? Yes or no? Right? Most of the cases. On the basis of which senior team members will take the final decision. Of course, they will be reviewing the work of all of these team members. But if these team members are not trained well, are not updated, they do not have a clarity of what the client is, what are the challenges, what are the significant processes, and what is required to be done, which is actually what you call as a planning discussion. So what will happen? You are putting at stake majority part of your fieldwork. Yes or no? Because we can easily say that 70 to 80% of the field work is performed by whom? Junior team members. So if you don't engage them, if you don't involve them in the planning, so what will happen? You miss out on these things, right? So that's why involvement of all the team members is very important, is essential during the planning process. Correct? Right? If you do this, what will happen? Of course, efficiency, effectiveness will increase. Yeah. They will also be able to share their knowledge and experience in relation to those aspects related to the audit. And most important part, they will get a clarity of what is required, how is that required to be done within the timelines. Okay, and they will also get a clarity of the timelines. Okay, now I have some small questions for you which you can just look at and answer. Okay, planning meeting is held between audit team and client team before the start of the audit. What do you think? What do you think? It's true or false? Saminathan says false. I understand Manish can also answer this. What do you think, Manish? It's correct or incorrect? See, these are simple, small one. Yeah. Planning is meeting to begin with. Will be an internal one. Okay. Once they have this, that's when they reach out to the client management in terms of the discussion. And over there, the discussion will be about what? How this audit will be executed. Or you can say effectively that audit plan is what you will discuss with the client team or the management. Correct? Now, let's look at this one. Next, in the planning meeting, audit team discusses the issues faced, misstatements identified during the current year audit in order to finalize the report. What do you think? Yes, what do you? In this case, what do you think? True or false? Swaminathan says it's false. Yes. Why do you think it's not correct? And what about Manish? What do you think? Yes, Manish, your thoughts? I think it is quite straightforward. Yes or no? Because if you look at the question properly, I think you will automatically get the answer. At one place, we are saying there's a planning meeting going on. To say that the audit team will discuss the issues faced, misstatements identified in relation to what? Current year audit. See, till the time the audit is not completed, and before that, till the time it's not planned, how can you get on to the issues faced? How will you get to know about the misstatements? That you will get to know once you complete the audit. And can we say that once you complete the audit, that's when you will have a planning meeting? No. No. Correct. So that's why what should be the answer? False. Yeah, quite clearly. I think same was the thought process from Swaminathan also. Very good. Yeah. Okay. Now, moving further. Let's talk about the preliminary engagement activities. See, preliminary engagement activities are all about, you can say, some sort of engagement acceptance work. Okay. Wherein the ethical requirements will have to be looked at, eligibility. All of these aspects will have to be considered by the auditor before even starting the work. Okay, why? Because till the time you don't accept it, till the time you do not have an understanding as to what is required to be done and how, with the management, how can you actually get on to the audit? No, you can't do that. Okay. Now, let's look at this small question again. We are not required to ensure independence of third party consultant hired only to carry out stock count at different location during the audit. What is your thought? Over to you. Yes, if you can just answer this and also explain this. So what is it that we are trying to say? Anyone who will elaborate on this? Yes. Manish, Swaminathan, do you want to explain this? Yes, yes, Swaminathan.
Sir, independence requirement is need, independent and ethical requirement needed even whenever we are using the third party or the internal audit and other issues, we need to check independence and integrity. The
Okay.
reason is that the ultimate counsel is the auditor. He is only responsible and liable for the audit. So the
Right.
independence not only from the main auditor side. See, it will
Right.
goes everywhere. Whoever the engaged in the team member, whether
Right.
it can be the party or internal auditor or whatever, wherever we are seeking the guidance, the independence to be checked out.
Right. But can you also help me understand? Okay. See, actually, there are two aspects. Why do you need independence of a third party consultant? Number one. Number two, if let's suppose you don't do this, so what is the concern? And how is it really relevant in the context of audit? Yes. Would you like to explain this
It,
further?
yeah, if there is no independent, then it may be favorable to the management or
Okay.
undue means or bias will be there.
Right.
See, that has to be eradicated. That
Right.
the objectivity will not be met.
Right. I think Manish has tried to answer this. Manish is saying it's false. See, in this case, we are talking about third party consultant. But whether it's third party or it's an internal party, what do we call this person as? Audit team member. Yes or no? You call him as audit team member. In fact, we discussed this that any person who will be working with the auditor, whether it's an external party or internal party, what do you call them as? Audit team member. And it's very important that the entire audit team, entire, is independent. Yeah. Why? Because that's the basic premise on which the audit will work. If this independence is lost, it is not there. So what will happen? Bias may creep in. Some sort of influence may be there, which is not acceptable. Correct? Yeah. So that's why it's very important consideration to ensure. Okay. Now, another point is about this preliminary engagement activities. So there's a document that we execute with the management. So now we are talking about the company as an auditor. And that's what you call as engagement letter. This engagement letter, in a very simple manner, we can say, is nothing but an agreement. Yes or no? It's actually nothing but an agreement between auditor and the audit auditee. That means the management. Now, what is the role of this engagement letter? See, this specifies everything in relation to audit. Scope of work, fees, timelines. Okay. management's responsibilities, auditors' responsibilities. Everything is clearly laid out over there, right? So why is this important? Because this will give the clarity to the auditor in terms of the expectations management or the
Then
company. Yeah. Now, can we say that this agreement is required only for the audit fee? No, that will be improper. Audit fee again is important, for which there has to be an agreement in place. But to say that this particular agreement is executed only for the audit fee, we discussed. Okay. So audit fee is just a part of this entire requirement in relation to the engagement letter. Okay. Yeah. Now, what do you do in the audit strategy? Resources to deploy, you'll think about amount of resources to allocate, means the number. You'll think about 6% should be deputed, 7 should be deputed, 2 will be good enough. Okay. When are those required to be deployed? What are the timelines? Over what period they will remain occupied? So if they are involved on some other engagements, then they need to be uh, clarity. Then there need to be a clarity in terms of when those other projects will be completed, when the relevant staff or the team members will get free, you can then move on to the audit of this particular company or the entity, right? Yeah. So of course, a supervision on that is something which anyways flows. Yeah. So now these are the important aspects you will generally consider when it comes to the audit strategy. I think some of these points we have already talked about. Now, a question for us. What are the circumstances where the auditor need to change planned procedures? Who will answer this? Yes. What are the circumstances? Quickly. Manish, Saminathan. Yes, Saminathan, please go ahead.
sir, when there is a unexpected events or
Okay.
changes in the condition, even the plan is decided based on understanding of the entity, fix some conditions. And while doing the audit, there is an event changes in the content on the process. If there is any significant matters involved,
Right. Right.
then it has to be discussed and we need to involve the further audit procedure, and we
Right.
need to change the audit strategy as well accordingly, and we need
Okay.
to revise the assessed risk already,
Right.
and accordingly we have to change update the audit plan.
Okay. Manish, if you want to add to this, anything? Yeah. So let's look at the circumstances. Any change in the condition, say the scope, for example. Now you may be thinking, but it's the statutory audit. Yeah, of course, but we are talking about any type of audit. If let's suppose there's some unexpected event which has occurred and which may require some reassessment in terms of the audit planning. auditor may become aware of discrepancies in the accounting records or conflicting or missing evidence. There again, the auditor may have to increase the extent of testing, which the auditor may have planned earlier. Correct? If there is some information the auditor has acquired, which is significantly different from the information or the knowledge which the auditor could gain at the time of planning. So why that has changed? Yes or no? Why that has changed? And if at all that has changed, okay, so what are the impact of this change on the audit or on the financial statement? So that's how the auditor will always be looking at it. See, ideally, it should not happen. But many a times, when you go talk to the client at the preliminary stage, means when you are more or less involved in the planning. Okay, so maybe a first level of understanding that you have obtained was from the person who didn't have much clarity. So that's why if you obtain the information, you get the inputs from any such person, what will happen? You will not get the complete clarity. Correct? Next factor could be extent of the misstatements. Means there are a lot of misstatements. So that may impact the threshold in itself at times. So what if the threshold goes down? What if the threshold goes up? So that will also have an impact on the audit procedures. Okay. Number two, as regards the misstatements may require extent of testing to be increased. Right? That is also one of the aspects to be considered. Okay. Now, there's also a consideration as around the direction supervision. Okay. Now, what will become the basis for this? See, again, this is something which is going to be entity specific, team specific, the way the team is structured, the way the audit procedures are planned. But generally, you will require some sort of review. And you will require consideration in terms of who is going to audit. Okay. Means it's not only about selecting the size or maybe the people for the job, but it's also about allocating the work to them. Okay. Now, once you allocate the work, what do? You will monitor that. Okay. You will review that before finalizing that, or you can say before drawing the conclusions, because some of the things may require rework at times. Okay. Now, in this case, what are the factors which the auditor should consider? Of course, it's the entity in terms of its size, complexity. What are the areas of audit? And in terms of the areas of audit, you can say ones which have got significant risk will require greater involvement of the auditor. Okay. Yeah. Assessment of risk of material misstatement and the auditor's expectation. So sometimes the expectation of the auditor may not align, okay, may not align with some of the specific requirements. the capabilities and the competence of the audit team members, which the auditor would have thought through at the time of planning stage. So that is again important. Yeah. Because depending on the experience, depending upon the clients which the team members would have faced, so they will be either more comfortable or less comfortable in terms of this audit. So that's why some sort of supervision, monitoring, or you can say the review will always be required. Okay. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Yeah, anyone? Any questions so far? Okay, Swaminathan is clear. Very good. See, anyways, this is quite a basic concept, but within this basic topic also, I would say a lot of important concepts are required to be considered. Okay, so that's an important part. Now, audit documentation. Audit documentation we have discussed earlier as well. It's an important part, or one should say the most important part. Because if you don't document, it's considered as if it's not done. So that could be a thought. Yes or no? So that's why what do you need? A proper documentation in relation to audit planning. That is required. So that's why what are the things you should document here? I would say everything in relation to the audit which the auditor should do will have to be documented. Okay, so that's why some of the things like we talked about, audit planning meeting, okay, this engagement formalities, etc. Then of course around this audit plan in terms of the materiality, in terms of the observations, in terms of the understanding, in terms of the update of the understanding of the entity, right? Planned procedures, okay, assessment of what is significant, what is not so significant. All of these things need to be documented in the working papers of the auditor. Okay, yeah. All right, so now we'll continue further on this. Let's suppose we have this audit planning, we have this audit strategy. Now, what is our next step? Our next step will be to get on to the audit execution, which is actually the substantive testing. Okay. And that's where we discuss that some of the benefits, some of the advantages the audit team is going to have. All right. Now, before we really get on to some of those requirements, what we can do is we can also talk about a term which is called as audit strategy. See, actually, audit strategy is what? Audit strategy is nothing but an audit plan. During the audit planning, you do this. But as around the audit strategy, some of the factors you will consider will be what? What is your scope? What is it that you are going to report on? What are the areas that the team will focus on? Some of the preliminary engagement activities, and in terms of preliminary engagement activities at times, auditor will generally have a discussion with the management wherein the auditor will get some insights. Yeah. So all of these factors are what you will consider in case of audit strategy. Now these points are important. Now why? Because sometimes you have questions in the exam, okay, which is requiring you to explain all of these things. Understood? Yeah. So that's why I'm just discussing this from the perspective of exam. Now, what is the relationship between this overall audit strategy and audit plan? We discussed now. So they are all interrelated in a way. Audit strategy is prepared as a part of this audit plan only. Audit plan, you can say, is the domain, okay, within which you have this overall audit strategy. It's a subdomain, right? They are interrelated because change in one would result change in other. Okay. Now, overall audit strategy and audit plan should take into consideration element of materiality and of course risk assessment. Right? Then there's also a term called as audit program. Okay. So can you explain what is an audit program? How is it different? What is the relevance of this? Quickly, over to you. Anyone? What is an audit program?
Sir, audit program is a kind of work allocation to the members, the engagement team members,
Okay.
during the execution part. It will contain the checklist, kind of
Right.
checklist. It will
Hmm.
tell the each and every items. Say example, with the important item during the process, you will say that procure to pay,
Yes.
sales
Okay.
or capitalization, depreciation, the process, the each process, they'll is the process, how, what are the, and whom it is, and what are the evidence to be collected. Is
Right.
that based on the questionnaires, or whether they can get the evidence for that by
Hmm.
doing that process?
Right.
It will elaborate in detailed way the audit program,
Yes.
which contains in the detailed way what,
Yes.
how, where, when, all these things will be there in the audit program.
Okay. Very good. So I think it's a good discussion that what is an audit program? Now it's commonly prepared for what? For the work allocation. So in a way, when we say that as a part of our audit planning, we need to do the job allocation, we need to assign the work with the timelines amongst the team members. Okay, so actually we are talking about one of the things, or you can say one of the documents which is called as audit program. Now over here, what are the factors you will consider? Nature of the business, overall plan, internal control system, accounting process of the organization, size of the organization, structure of its management, right? What is the organization structure? What are the policies which the management have put in place? Okay. All of these factors are going to be important, right? Now, in relation to this audit, we have discussed quite a lot. What an audit plan is, what is required in relation to audit plan. Now what we can do is we can just move on to this next step about the audit execution. But before that, I think we can take a break now. Yeah, because Then we'll talk about this next step, audit execution, which is actually, you can say, in a way, a part of the field work wherein you are involved in the control testing, you are involved in the substantive testing, basis which, of course, the conclusions will be drawn, and of course, the reporting will have to take place. Yeah. But when it comes to the audit execution, so it's nothing but a linked activity, or you can say it is something which is dependent on what you do in the audit planning. Yeah. But we will discuss this once we get on to this audit execution, right? So I think what we can do is, if there's any questions you may have, we can discuss that. All right, so Saminathan is clear on this. Okay, so let's take a break then, and after the break we will continue, right? Manish, we can take a break now. All right. So now moving further. Okay, so we'll talk about this audit execution. Now, what is audit execution actually? See, if you go back to that discussion that we had, once you have this planning, that is when you start the testing. Correct. Now, in terms of this testing, what will you do? You will test the controls. You will also test various details of the company, okay, which is also called as test of details. You will also apply some analytical procedures. Yes or no? So all of these are a part, you can say, of a stage which you call as execution stage. Okay. Now, during this execution stage, in a way, you are applying everything which you have considered in your planning. Okay. Means something that you have planned, you are now applying that. Yeah. In a very broad manner, this is what you can say. Because that's the end objective of the audit. But can we say that this execution in a way is also a part of planning, or you can say will also involve to a certain extent a planning process? The answer is yes, both the points are correct. So you can say it's a continuity, yeah, because now you are moving on to the second stage, but the second stage is something which is interdependent on the first stage, because on the basis of plan you are executing the things, and during the execution itself, if there is any kind of replanning you need to do, you'll do that. That's why you kept your planning flexible. Yes or no? Yeah. So this is again a very important aspect to be considered. Now, in relation to this testing, some of the considerations you'll have could be in relation to, say, for example, uh, okay, you can say, let's suppose on a particular project, say, audit of financial statements are involved. And in respect of those financial statements, let's suppose we talk about the consolidated financial statements, right? Now, you happen to be the principal auditor, means you will audit the consolidated financial statements. But the components therein, means some of the subsidiaries companies, or say associate or JVs, which are getting consolidated, have not been audited by you. Let's suppose they have been audited by some other auditors, which is what you call as component auditors. There is one principal auditor, second is component auditor. Now, therein you need to apply the thought. If you remember, we talked about group audit also. What is that? Whether you will be relying on the work of those auditors or not. To what extent you will use the work of those auditors, because eventually in terms of your final reporting on the consolidated financial statements, you are going to place some reliance on the work of those auditors or not. Yeah. So that's why during the execution stage, you need to plan this part further. You need to ensure that some of the procedures you'll do as a top up to what the component auditors have done has been done or not. If there are any challenges they are facing, if there are any issues that have come up which are not dealt at the branch level or maybe at the component level, which is required to be dealt at the corporate level. So this is something you will consider as part of this entire process. Okay. Now, in relation to the component, some of the things which this essay will require will be the instructions. Now, what will the component do? Component does something which the principal auditor will ask him to do. So that's why principal auditor will roll out a set of instructions for the component auditor to follow. So the component auditor will be actually working on those or on the basis of those instructions. Yeah. In fact, even if we talk about the materiality, so that materiality again is a consideration which will come from the principal auditor, right? So that is again something which is important, okay, for the auditor to be looked at. Now, when the component auditor will report, the final reporting which the component auditor will provide, if there are any kind of disclaimers, if there are any modifications over there. Now, who will be dealing with that? Who will be responsible for that? And whether the component auditor is able to complete the work as per the timelines or not, because eventually this entire set at a console level is what is a combination of all of those components. Yeah, so that's why if the component is not able to complete the work, so its impact at the corporate level, at the console level will have to be looked at. So that will have to be considered. Yeah. There are certain set of procedures which the principal auditor may require to follow. For example, some of the critical areas, some of the significant areas over which the component auditor may have worked, but the principal auditor requires some inputs as around those areas. Input not only in terms of the observations, but also in terms of the procedures, the, the considerations which the component auditor would have followed. Yeah. Okay. Now, in this case, because it's an activity which requires the principal auditor to report on the consolidated financial statements wherein the components are consolidated. So that's why it's important that the two auditors, the principal and the component, they are communicating. They are linked to each other. Okay. So there has to be an appropriate level of coordination. Only then this entire process will become effective. Otherwise, what will happen? Otherwise, there will be challenges. Okay. And the outcome may not be as effective. Correct. Similarly, there's another aspect as around the internal audit. Now, most of the organizations today, what do you find? You will find an internal audit system to be in place. In fact, if you look at the large organizations, medium organizations, it's a very common thing. You'll have a system of internal audit. Now, that system of internal audit could again be of two types. What is that? Maybe the entity has engaged third party, means external consultants who are providing the internal audit services, or this may be an in-house department. In both the cases, what will matter to the statutory auditor is what? Is the outcome. Is the outcome. And here again, What is it that the statutory auditor will want to look at? See, the objective of the statutory auditor is that internal audit system should act as a support function for the statutory auditor. Now, what is this support function? Support function means which is supporting the statutory auditor. In terms of what? In terms of his work. Now, how do you achieve this support? So there are two ways. Either you will say, okay, so this work is completed by internal audit, so that's why I'll not be looking at it. But can the statutory auditor do that? No, because the end responsibility lies on him. Okay, so therefore he cannot place reliance, or he cannot just simply pass on the responsibility. So what can he do? See, at best, what he can do is he can leverage in relation to the procedures, in relation to the areas that the internal auditors would have looked at. Yeah, because something which internal auditor would have looked at, that's what the statutory auditor can consider. Some of the observations, some of the key risk areas. Okay, because over here the idea is to leverage, okay, on the basis of what the internal auditor has done, on the basis of what the internal auditor has performed. Yeah, so that's the thought process. So that's the intent with which this has to be done. Why? Because over here, unlike what the principal auditor do will in case of component auditor, this cannot be put as a caveat that this is something which the component auditor has done. No, so you can't do that for internal audit. Over here, the end responsibility continues to lie with the statutory auditor. So that's why statutory auditor will have to consider each and every aspect over here. Yeah, clear? Okay, now as around these observations at times which the internal auditor may be having. Now question rises, how is this going to help the statutory auditor? So let's suppose inventory valuation is a significant risk area. In the past years, what the statutory auditor has observed is that every time there is anything around inventory, okay, so it's a complex calculation, it's quite manual. Okay, even though the systems are in place, but still it's a manual working, and this is prone to errors. So that's why what the statutory auditor may have planned along with the internal auditor and the management is that this is one area over which the controls need to be strengthened, the process needs to be improved, so that tomorrow, if required, uh, it's something which the management can also review. Internal audit system needs to be working on this. Yeah, so that at the time of statutory audit, some of these challenges are reduced. Now, if let's suppose internal auditors' observations are not much, or maybe continue to be in line with what there were in the previous years. So how does it help the statutory auditor? See, the statutory auditor can take it forward. Of course, he'll top it up with the procedures on this particular area or on this particular process. But something which the internal auditor would have found, would have observed, is only going to help the statutory auditor. And this is what the statutory auditor can leverage on. Okay. Yeah. So that's why whenever any statutory audit is performed, so what is it that the statutory auditor will ask for? Report of the internal auditor. Yeah. So that's what the statutory auditor will generally ask for. That is something which is important. Okay. Yeah. Another area is about the consideration of an expert. Now, this is again a very common area. Now, the question arises, what do you mean by expert here? See, there are two types of experts over which you can say there could be a discussion. One is the expert of the management. A very common example for that could be the actuary. Every reporting date, what do you find? Some of these employee benefits require actuarial valuation. Yes or no? They require actuarial valuation. In which case, what will you do as a management? Management will be involved in the actuarial valuation process. Management will provide some inputs to the actuary, basis which actuary will get onto this working. Okay. Now, in this case, management has engaged an expert. So that expert is doing what? That expert is working on some areas, is providing some information to the management, which is going to be a part of the financial statements. Now, as an auditor, do we have any considerations around this? The answer is yes. See, if there is some information that has come, whether from the management or from a third party, as an auditor, what will you do? You will check. You will check whether that outcome, the report, is appropriate or not. So, how do you check that? So, you will question some of the assumptions which the actuary would have considered. And before that, you will also question the selection of the expert, means whether that expert is competent to do that work or not. Yes or no? Yeah. So these are some of the basic requirements you will have in place. Always. Correct. Now, once you do this, then you are through. Like any other audit procedure, you will also be performing the procedures over here. And in this case, again, will you be relying on the work of that expert, or can you rely on the work of that expert? Not again. Not possible. Okay, so this is one type of expert you may have. Then there is another type of expert you may have. Now that expert is not engaged by the management. So who will engage him? Who will hire that expert? It will be done by the auditor. Now the auditor will bring in one expert. Now question arises that why would an auditor need an expert? See, this is something which the auditor will have to evaluate. It will be based on the considerations of the auditor. See, at times there could be certain areas wherein some complexity might be involved, some technicality might be there, over which the auditor may not have the expertise, over which auditor may not have the relevant experience, but auditor will still be required to audit that, because he is going to opine upon the financial statement which will have that information. So how will the auditor achieve this? That is where auditor will engage a third party, or you can say an expert, who will support the auditor in auditing those areas or that particular item. Now here again the same question arises, because now it's an expert, and we also understand that there was a limitation of the auditor, that he couldn't work on some of the things. Okay. So he didn't have the relevant, let's say, experience, the expertise was not there. So that's why he has engaged an expert. Okay, so and which is permissible. So in such a case, will it be appropriate for the auditor, or can the auditor in this situation rely upon the work of the auditor's expert? Here again, no. Okay, here again the same question will arise. Okay, so the same thought process will have to be applied. See, eventually the responsibility as regards the audit of financial statements will not go away. That will continue to remain with the auditor. For the purposes of executing this, what the auditor has done is auditor has engaged his own expert. We are not talking about the management expert now, auditor's own expert. Here again, the auditor is going to leverage upon some of the things which the expert will do, and responsibility will continue to lie with the auditor only. Right? Clear? Now, can you give me some examples, over to you, where you think auditor's expert may be required? Over to you. Any example that comes to your mind? What are those areas where you consider this?
Sir,
Yes.
see, auditor expert needed
Hmm.
when the expert opinion is required other than the auditing and accounting.
Okay.
That field work, that those for those items, the auditor will use the audit expert.
Okay.
Expert can be internal or external.
Right.
They can internally have the some of the partner or staff or some person within the firm itself, they can appoint someone, or if the firm has multiple branches, there
Right.
also they can take it someone for the audit
Right.
expert.
Okay.
And also when there is no that external, that other auditor also, the external expert also they can use. See, the
Okay.
area for accounting and auditing, the auditor himself, he will find, he will fix the issue.
Okay.
Apart from the auditing and accounting, say example the actuaries valuation, or some of that PPE valuation.
Right.
That PPE, as per the accounting standards in 16 Indian
Hmm.
accounting standard, the expert
Okay.
and the registered valuer only can do that. As per CARA also is indicating that. So
Okay.
these are the area where we can involve that expert opinion from the auditor side.
Right.
The same way, the management also will have the management expert. The management
Okay.
expert will be differ from the auditor expert.
Right.
So likewise, the management also will have, they can appoint that internally or externally, they can appoint someone for the management expert in the field other than the accounting and auditing.
Okay.
This is what I feel that the area where the auditor expert and the management expert is used.
Okay. Any other area? All right. So
Mm,
now, as around this auditor's expert, see, there is no exhaustive list which we can discuss. Now, again, it will vary from entity to entity. In some of the cases, what may happen is auditor may engage an industry expert. Why? Because maybe the industry is new to the auditor, so he doesn't have the relevant experience, and he wants to engage an expert who can help the auditor in various nuances which may be involved in that particular industry, or some of the areas which would be there in the financial statements may be quite technical. A very common example for this could be the involvement of IT team. Yes or no? So these days, there is no organization you will find which is working in a manual environment. Correct? Everywhere, where what do you have? You have a system of uh, technology. Okay, it's all technology driven. So it's about the IT systems. It's about the automated environment. It's about the automated controls that the auditor will have to deal with in respect of audit of the financial statements. So how will that be achieved? So the auditor may not have the understanding of some of those systems. So wherein the auditor may consider involving the experts, okay, and which you very commonly find in respect of most of the audits. Okay. Similarly, involvement of the tax experts. See, again, it's a very, very common thing you find in respect of most of the audits. Many a times, what will happen? Entity may have some matter which is in relation to, say, income tax or maybe indirect tax, which has been under litigation, over which the entity may have considered a contingent liability, or maybe the entity has not considered a provision. So, in those scenarios, auditor being an auditor and an accounting expert may not have the relevant experience at times, or you can say the expertise in relation to those taxation matters. And he may need the involvement of the tax experts, okay, in relation to that particular area to be reviewed. Now, in this case, can we say that the auditor can just simply engage the expert and say that this is what the expert has done? So that's why I don't need to anything. I don't need to do anything on that. See, that again will be inappropriate. One, he can't place reliance on that. He will be responsible for that. Second, even though the auditor is not an expert, he needs to be involved in this. He needs to understand what the expert has done. Okay. He needs to question that. Okay, and that is only possible when he gets involved in this entire process, so that he has a clarity as to whether the expert has done the right job or not. Okay, now again, it's too technical for the auditor to decide, but at the working level, auditor should have the clarity as to what the expert has done and whether that is really is in line with the objectives of the auditor or not. Okay, yeah. So this is something which is important for the auditor to consider. Correct. Yeah. So this is, I would say, another consideration which the auditor will generally have, whether it's about the involvement of his own expert or whether it is about the involvement of the management's expert. Okay. Now, next consideration is in relation to those areas over which. Now, what are those areas? Estimates. See, if you talk about accounting estimates, these are the areas over which 100% accuracy is not possible. Yes or no? Some sort of approximation is required. That's why these are called as estimates, which the management will have to estimate. And it requires assumptions to be taken by the management, which brings in some sort of subjectivity. And that is where it is important for the auditor to be considering the risks which are involved in respect of these areas in particular. Why is that so? Because the moment you say there is a subjectivity, assumptions are involved. Yeah, so it may happen that there is some sort of manipulation. Yeah, management bias may have been there, and which is very, very important for the auditor to look at. Yes or no? So that's why if you look at today's environment in particular, audit of accounting estimates happens to be a very important area. You can say the key area. Okay. There's a lot of focus of the regulators in respect of this particular area. And what is the reason? The reason is the subjectivity which is involved. Okay. So some of these assumptions which the management will consider, auditor needs to question them, auditor needs to challenge them as to whether those are appropriate or not. So auditor cannot just simply move ahead with an understanding that if there are some assumptions, so it's good. No. So that understanding or that predefined, you can say, assessment on the part of the auditor may not be appropriate. Okay. So that is again a very important consideration on the part of the auditor. Right? Now, all of these things actually are a part of which stage? So if you go back to our discussion, all of these form a part of the stage which you call as execution. And during this execution, while some of these areas will be looked at, what will happen? Some conclusions will also be drawn. Okay. In some of the cases, there may be some misstatements as well. Now, we are not talking about the fraud here or only the fraud. Now, some of the misstatements could be the errors which are there. Now, here again, what are going to be the considerations? Idea will be to ensure that all of these misstatements at an accumulated level, they are not crossing the materiality threshold. Okay. Yeah. They are not crossing the materiality threshold. Further, this is not going to be the end step. All these misstatements, what is going to be the endeavor? See, because these pertain to the financial statement, so that's why they need to be rectified, which the management would also be willing to do in most of the cases, except for some timelines or the challenges which they may have. So therein the material misstatements become important. So the consideration of the auditor, okay, what is material, what is not material. Those are material, have been adjusted, have been corrected. Those which are immaterial, as to what is it that the management is doing about it, and how does that have any bearing in terms of some of these misstatements which the auditor has identified on the overall audit plan. So that is again very important area for the auditor to consider. Plus, on the control system, on the control environment which the entity is having, for the management to consider and auditor to consider. Okay, so all of these factors are, I would say, some part which the auditor will always be looking at, which he is always going to be focusing on, right? So this is something which the execution stage will generally be involving, right? Okay. So now what we can do is, now we can just move on to some of the questions in a same way, the way we have been doing. Okay. We'll just try to look at some of the questions, some of the discussions as around those scenarios to deal with, right? All right, so now let me just move on to the questions. Okay, so let's look at these. XWL was engaged in dealing in commodity futures trading based in Surat. All right, so this is the nature of the business. CAP based at Delhi was the auditor of the company. Okay, so this is the auditor of the company. Auditor did not even once visit the office of the company. Failed to understand nature of the business of the company. all the papers, means all the required information, documents, books of accounts were received on emails. Okay, so this is how the auditor has done the work. There were also included in his working papers checklists which had a requirement of test checking of cost of raw material consumed and cost of stores and spares. Now this appears to be weird. Why? Because looking at the nature of the business which the entity is having, okay, do you think a checklist as around RM consumed, cost of material is going to be relevant? Yeah, so that is again question mark as to why would that be required. There was nothing in his working papers showing understanding of the nature of the business of the company. Okay, now what does it reflect upon planning of audit by this CA? All right. Now in this case, I think clearly some of the problems have been observed. Yes or no? These are clearly evident if you look at the fact pattern which is given. For an auditor, for the planning, what is the first and foremost requirement? Understanding of the business. Yes or no? Now, for this understanding of the business, is it necessary that we go to the client place at least once? One should say that it's a kind of necessity which can't be ignored, because till the time you go look at the company, look at their processes, how will you get to know? How will you get a clear understanding of their business? Yeah, appears to be very difficult. Okay, and that's why they are saying that the auditor failed to understand the nature of business. Okay, this entire audit was done in a remote manner, which is okay. Okay, yeah, so in a remote manner, the auditor can always do that, but the auditor can always keep it in a hybrid mode. Maybe he can just visit there once, understand that for a limited period, collect some of the linked information, and the remaining part can be done in an offline manner. Okay, but to say that understanding is not obtained will put a question mark on the audit planning in itself as to how the auditor would have designed the audit procedures. Do you think it's possible for the auditor to design the audit procedures? No, that's not possible. Yeah, so it will be a big problem. Further, it appears that the auditor is using some standardized document, standardized checklists, and that is applied to all the types of audits, irrespective of the nature of the business of the entity. Now, audit is something which you can say to a great extent requires application of certain procedures, but it's not something that you can apply in 100% manner. See, each and every entity may have some specific requirements. It will have its own processes, but there are few things which can easily find out. What is that? The requirement for checklist on these areas. Are they really relevant in relation to this type of business? Answer is no, right? So that's why some of these documents, even though the auditor will maintain, that will reflect poorly on his understanding. Okay, so that will further substantiate that he has not understood and he doesn't have the clarity of the business. Okay, so one is attempt is not made and whatever understanding he had was improper. Okay, so let's understand. Let's look at the solution. SA 300 requires auditor to plan the audit in such a manner that it is performed effectively, right? It also requires auditor to establish the audit strategy, including identifying the characteristics of engagement, facilitating him to define its scope, planning of nature, timing, extent of audit procedures. Okay. In the given situation, auditor has flouted the requirements of SA 300. The auditor has to plan the audit commensurate to the nature and complexity of the business and identify and assess risk of material misstatement, which is only possible when you obtain an understanding. Otherwise, how will you identify the risk? How will you assess that? Not possible. Yes or no? Further, the final documentation which you will come across will have a problem. Why? Because if you look at this checklist in the working papers, so what is the first thought process you'll have? That any document has been used anywhere. Okay. A thought has not been applied as to what should go where. Correct. So that's why one can clearly say that planning was not done or planning was not appropriate. Right? Clear on this? Yeah. Now see, when you have questions like this, okay, so I would say in the exam, it's very easy for you to answer. There's no doubt about it. I'm sure you will be very comfortable with these type of questions. But the only aspect I think which you need to now understand is that even with the questions that you are comfortable with in terms of whether you will be able to answer or not, how do you answer that and how do you present that? That is again very, very important. Okay, so that's why this layout or the way this answer is given, I'm not saying that you will go verbatim by what is given over here. But some of these technical terms, some of these definitions, some of these references of the auditing standards, if you will bring in, that will only enhance and, the overall presentation that you will have. Okay, let's look at the next one. CA Nikita is conducting audit of a leading society engaged in promoting awareness regarding usefulness of internet among the disadvantaged sections of the society through easily understandable means and methods. Okay. The society is also registered under FCRA 2010 for receipt of foreign contributions. Yeah. During the course of audit, she embarked upon extensive procedures relating to verification of receipt of foreign contributions to rule out round tripping in comparison to procedures originally thought of. She is documenting various procedures performed by her, including relevant audit findings. However, she doesn't feel the need for putting into writing about how she planned the whole exercise. I think this is the important part. Now, in this case, what do you think about this consideration? Do you think it's appropriate? Not appropriate? Okay. In line with the requirements of the auditing standards? You can just try to answer this. Over to you. Yes, anyone? Any thoughts?
Sir, as we studied as per SC 300, the
Okay,
audit plan and the audit strategy and any significant changes during
yes,
the audit process, that also to be documented.
right,
And also the memorandum, the initial audit engagement and audit the preliminary activities relating to that, and what is the timing nature, and what is the outcome of that significant matters, the point discussed. See,
right,
everything should be documented actually, as per the
okay,
SA 300. But in this case, the CA Nikita
hmm.
is not done that part actually.
Okay,
Even though she planned everything in a perfect manner, and
yes,
also that the receipt of foreign contribution as per the FEMA, the checking is very, very important. And how that
right,
this is one of the significant process,
okay,
wherein also she should get the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. And
right,
those part also she could document it. That
yes,
overall she grossly negligence on the documentation part with
okay,
respect to planning and its execution.
right. Very good. So let's look at this. SA 300 requires auditor to document the audit plan as well as significant changes made during the audit engagement. Now, please remember the understanding that something which is not documented is not done. In the given case, she has done all the things which are required, but she doesn't document it. So, what will happen? It's like undoing what you have done. Yes or no? Yeah. So, the documentation of the audit plan is a record of what? Planned nature, timing, extent of risk assessment procedures. It also serves as a record of the proper planning of audit procedures that can be reviewed and approved prior to their performance. changes to the audit plan along with reasons thereof due to embarking upon extensive procedures related to verification of foreign contributions in comparison to what was originally envisaged need to be documented. Yeah, because it's an important thing. Failure to document the audit plan could entail risk of not conducting audit. Okay, which is of actually no use. Why? Because if you've done the work, then why do you want to be in a situation wherein you are not documenting it? Yeah, that doesn't seem to be logical. Clear? Let's look at the next one. CA Saurabh is an engagement partner, is conducting statutory audit of BBI Bank for SBT and Associates. Okay, so it's the statutory audit of bank. The bank has 1034 branches spread all over. So that's how the banks are structured. Okay. And if you look at the branches, so who will be auditing those branches? Branch auditors. Correct? So basically we are talking about the components. So there are components for those components, you have the component auditor. In respect of one large branch audited by a branch auditor, there were errors in NPA classification of many advances which were not pointed out by the branch auditor in his report through the memorandum of changes, and nil memorandum of changes were reported electronically. Now, what is this document memorandum of changes? See, if let's suppose there are any misstatements, so the auditor will provide a document that these are the misstatements. Okay, so this is how you will rectify this. So you can say this is about the corrected misstatement or a document of corrected misstatements. But in this case, when the error has not been found out, of course, no action has been taken on that. During the overall review of financial statements of the bank by the statutory auditor, the above said errors did not come into light. Statutory auditor had also called soft copies of internal inspection report and concurrent audit reports of above branch as a part of overall review procedures. However, these reports did not point out any irregularities in such accounts. Okay. Would the statutory auditor of the bank be liable for above lapses? That's one. What precautions have to be taken by the statutory auditor of the bank? See, we are talking about the central auditor here, not the component auditor. While expressing opinion considering possibilities of such situations. Yes, over to you. What do you think? What should be done? What are the considerations? Yes. Sorry, your voice. is not clear. I think there's some network issue. I think Saminathan, you are trying to speak. Okay, no worries. I can see one query coming from Manish. Let me just read this because it's related to the same question. So Manish is asking, as per SA 600, branch auditor is not the component auditor, but who is not principal auditor is component auditor, and principal auditor is such branch auditor. It's very confusing. And principal auditor is such branch auditor is auditor who are significant. Manish, I would appreciate, maybe let's go through this answer first, and then
Hello,
if you
sir.
can just
Am
yes, Saminathan,
I audible now,
it
sir?
appears yes, you are audible now. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, sir. See, here the statutory auditor is the principal
Yes,
auditor of the bank.
right,
The bank has multiple branches.
right,
See, there is always that is called the component. Component in this is the principal auditor.
right, right.
So as far as that SA 600 using the other
Yes,
auditors is concerned, the statutory auditor is not responsible for the audit done by the other auditor, which means a component auditor.
okay,
He is also so only the responsible thing is that he has to be
okay.
ethical
Now again, we are losing you.
requirement.
Now again, we are losing you. I think
Even
seems there's some technical issue which has come up again now. But anyways,
check and when
I think Saminathan, now it's not audible again. But anyways, let me just get on to this solution. Okay. So let's try to understand as to what is required to be done over here. All right. So let's try to look at this. Yeah. So now in the given situation, what do we have? We have the requirements reporting which the principal auditor will be doing. And what are the risks that he is subject to? Now, what does this SA 600 require? Let's talk about it first. I think this is also a question of Manish. SA 600 states principal auditor would not be responsible in respect of the work entrusted to other auditors. Clear? Except in those circumstances which should have aroused his suspicion about the reliability of the work performed by other auditors. When the principal auditor has to base his opinion on the financial information of the entity as a whole, relying upon the statements and reports of other auditors, his report should clearly state about the division of responsibility. Okay, so this window is available under SA 600, division of responsibility. Okay, wherein the statutory auditor, means the principal auditor, will have to indicate extent to which financial information of components audited by other auditors have been included. Okay, means the number of divisions, branches, subsidiaries, or other components audited by other auditors other than central auditor. in the given situation, nothing has come to the light of the central statutory auditor. So by statutory auditor, we are talking about the principal auditor here. Okay. Therefore, he should not be held responsible for the work performed by branch auditor. The only point is his report has to clearly specify that these branches have been audited by other auditors. Okay, so by doing this, what will happen? So he is actually resorting to the division of responsibility, okay, which SA 600 requires. Right? Clear? So I'm just again hoping, Manish, you're clear on your question. If you believe there is further query or your question is not answered, okay, okay, yes. Manish, I would appreciate if you can just explain, if you can speak, explain, that will be greater. Yeah, but as regards your question, who is the principal auditor? See, the principal auditor in the given case is the auditor of the bank. Now, if you look at this bank, BBI Bank, so the way it is structured is it will have a head office and various branches. Okay. When the financial statements of the bank will be prepared, will you keep branches and HO separate? No. You will bring them all together. Yes or no? So you'll bring them all together. So you'll combine these two. So the principal auditor is who? Is the auditor of bank as a whole. Okay. Who is also auditing the head office. Who are the component auditors? Auditors of these branches. Clear? Yeah, Manish, clear on this? Okay, great. Very good. Manish is clear. Let's move on to the next one. CA Keshav Raj is conducting statutory audit of a listed company. What is this company? Live with Nature Limited. So that's the company. Company is engaged in producing environment-friendly niche products for newborn babies. There is also a well-functioning internal audit department in the company. So the company has an internal audit department. So this internal audit system is in place. Okay. On perusal of internal audit reports, he finds that not only verification of inventories was attended by the internal auditor at regular intervals during the year, but workings were also made in respect of inventory valuation as at the year end. Okay. He has also attended inventory count at the end of the financial year, and no prima facie adverse inferences were drawn by him. So he has attended the inventory count. No prima facie adverse inferences were drawn by him. right? However, on going through inventory reports, he gathers that inventories are being held for considerably long period before being sold. Okay. Internal audit reports have not taken this aspect into consideration. Means they have not considered it, or you can say this is not something you will find in their report. Now the question arises, should he be relying upon the inventory valuation work which is performed by the by the internal auditor? Understood? Yeah. So I think about internal audit we have discussed as to what do you do, what sort of reliance you will place on that. Can you place reliance on that or not? Correct? No. In this case, what do you do? For a particular account balance, class of transaction or disclosure, the higher an assessed risk of material misstatement at the assertion level, the more judgment is often involved in planning and performing the audit procedures and evaluating the results thereof. In such circumstances, external auditor will need to perform more procedures. So you can say extent of testing will increase. Yes or no? And why would that be the case? Because that is something which is subject to significant risk. Okay. In such a case, will he be making use of the internal audit? Yes, no doubt. He will be making use of the internal audit. He will be looking into those aspects, but it will not be the reliance that he'll place upon that solely. Okay. Furthermore, as explained in Essay 200, higher the assessed risk of material misstatement, more persuasive the evidence required by the auditor will need to be, and therefore auditor will need to perform more of the work in a direct manner. Yes or no? Yeah. In the given situation, in the light of what this auditing standard requires, inventories are being held for considerably long period before being sold. Because the company is dealing in niche products, there's a risk of inventory obsolescence. Correct? Clearly, there's a risk. It carries a significant risk of material misstatement and requires more judgment on the part of statutory auditor in planning and performing procedures. Okay, so clearly you have this risk. Now, due to this risk, what will happen? Auditor will have to look at the procedures around comparing the NRV with the costs. Step number 2. Right? Therefore, in the given situation, what should the auditor do? Perform the procedures directly in accordance with auditing standard 610. Clear? Yeah, clear on this? All right, so let's look at the next question. KRP Limited at its AGM appointed Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Z as joint auditors to conduct audit for the financial year 23-24 for the valuation of gratuity scheme of the company. XYZ wanted to refer their own known actuaries Due to the difference of opinion, all the joint auditors consulted their respective actuaries. Subsequently, major difference was found in the actuarial reports. However, Mr. X agreed to Mr. Y's actuarial's report, though Z did not. X contends Y's report shall be considered in the audit report due to majority of the votes. Now, Z is in a dilemma. Explain the responsibility of the auditors in case a report made by Y's actually later on was found faulty. I think this is one area over which we have had significant discussions in the previous session also, right? I think Saminathan, you want to discuss this? Yes, please go ahead. I think you want to speak.
Sir, in this case, um, joint auditors are there. And is there. All are joint auditors. Two joint auditor X, Y, um, and it's not agree X and Y. The thing is that the auditor can appoint they can determine to appoint that the expert. They can use the expert, and the expert while are using they have to check the competency, capabilities, and independence also he has to verify, and confidentiality also he has to ensure while appointing that expert opinion. That is not a matter here. The majority opinion is based on the X and Y, but
Correct.
Z is not agreeing on this. Wherein in this situation, Z can issue the separate audit report, wherein he can provide the cross reference where he is not agreeing that. In this
Right.
case, that XY only is responsible for this matter, but Z
Hmm.
is not responsible, is not liable. The reason is that he has issued a separate report and with the intention.
Right. So see, in the given situation, what do you have? Clearly, with the understanding that we have obtained, that if you involve the expert, does it absolve you of the responsibility? Answer is no. Okay. Yeah. So it was the duty of XYZ before using gratuity valuation report to ensure the relevance and reasonableness of the assumptions and the methods used. X and Y will be held responsible for the negligence. Z will not be. Why? Because it had a different one. So let's look at the next one. During the audit of FMP Limited, engagement partner completed his reviews, also ensured compliance with independence requirements that apply to the engagement. Engagement files were also reviewed by EQCR except the independence assessment documentation. Engagement partner was of the view that matters related to independence assessment are responsibility of engagement partner and not the EQCR. EQCR objected to this and refused to sign off the documentation. Okay, so now the point is EQCR was provided with all the relevant working papers. Okay. Even though the audit team has worked on independence assessment, which has also been documented. So it's not that audit team has not worked on this. The only problem is this assessment has not been produced to the EQCR. Now, as far as the EQCR's role is concerned, can we say that this independence assessment is important for him? No doubt. Yeah, no doubt it's an important consideration for him. Because for the purposes of audit only, it's an important consideration. Yeah. Okay, so that's why in the given case, the thought process of the engagement partner to say that this section is not meant for EQCR, which happens to be a very critical area, is not appropriate. So the independence assessment documentation should have been given to the EQCR. If that is not done, it will not have the sign off of the EQCR. So you can say to a certain extent, it will be a deficiency as far as this entire audit process, or you can say the procedures, are involved. Clear on this? Yeah. So with this, what we can do is we can just close our discussion, but there's a very important announcement for everyone. See, the next session that was planned for Monday will be taking place on Wednesday. Okay. So the next session, which is planned for 17th of November on audit, okay, that will be taking place on 19th. Instead, on 17th, you'll have the session on financial reporting. Yeah, so please make a note of this and please pass on this message to your colleagues, okay, so that they also have the relevant information around it. Yeah, though this again update is given on the portal, you can go check that, but some of those who are around, it's better that you inform your colleagues around it. All right, so with this, we can just close our discussion. Thanks everyone for your time today. Thanks so much. Yes, Manish, thanks.